home. I see some of you on the other side of the planet, some of you here close by, but welcome. If you can type in where you're at, that would be a great starting point for us so we know where everybody is for today's webinar. Welcome to this one. At Engage and Grow, one of the things that we find really important is helping people understand what is going on currently, how is the world moving, and what does HR, human resources look like? How is it changing? How is it growing? And there's a lot of surveys being done right now, obviously, and we've taken I'll share with you some of the results here in today's webinar. But what we're finding is that the speed with which companies are keeping up with the changes in HR standards or what's expected by employees today, because, if we look back 10, 15, even 20 years ago, people led with the knowledge that the people that they were leading didn't really have much choice to change. We led with this sort of a leadership of they don't get to choose. In today's world, where not only do they have a lot of choice, in fact, it's not just choice, their choice is coming at them thick and fast. Your people are listed on LinkedIn, they're probably being recruited right now. And so in this new era, we've got to look at how human resources needs to be today. What has to happen today? Thank you. Can't hear me clearly. Okay, let's switch the microphone across then. Thing. How's that, gang? A thumbs up if you can hear me clearly. Sarah? Yes? Fantastic. All right, well, let me go back over what it was that we just covered to make sure that we've got it there. Thanks for typing in where you are at, and welcome to the thing. If you haven't typed in what city you're in, so Louisville, obviously, Portugal's in the house. Gee, what time of day is it in Portugal? Oh, it's not too bad for you. In this new era of human resources, where the level of choice of people is totally different. Pre-COVID, they still had a lot of choice, I guess, pre-COVID, but post-COVID, we're sitting here where, actually, let's go back a ways. Let's go back 20 years ago when a leader could lead in the knowledge that their people didn't have a lot of choice, that people didn't have a lot of choice to leave, to go somewhere else, sort of thing. And I guess the further back you go, the more that was the case. In today's world, not only do people have a choice to leave, not only do they have the opportunity to leave, they can leave and set up their own shop. They can leave and do a side gig. They can start a side gig today and turn it into a full-time thing. They're probably, if they're on LinkedIn, they're probably being recruited as we speak. So human resources has to change based on the needs, wants, and desires of the people that we are leading. The humans in our organization have had, society's changed, the people have changed, their needs, wants, and desires are different. The millennials, the Gen X's, the Gen Z's, different level of desire for each and every one of them. So let's take a look at the new HR and see how does it fit in today. And I guess even looking at it, it's not just a simple thing where we say, okay, it's one way. There is something that every one of our people is different and every organization is different. But Drucker hit the nail on the head many moons ago in management when he said that our goal is to make sure people can achieve extraordinary things, can do extraordinary things. And so if our goal is to get the most, the best, the extraordinary out of our people, then we have to start looking at it from a different perspective because their needs, wants, and desires have shifted. And in many cases shifted quite dramatically. So I'll give you a quick second to read this one, but understanding that the well-being of the workplace, okay? So if we want to recruit, train, and retain great people, and that retain being a very big part of it, but even the recruiting side of it is very important, then we need to start looking at our workplace differently. We need to start looking at the well-being of our workplace a little differently. And so with that holistic approach, where it's not just about the career, it's not just about the financial, we start to move around this and say, okay, yes, their financial well-being and their career well-being is something that we've probably done quite well historically. Like most companies have been fairly strong on that. Social has definitely been something that a lot of companies got right, but many companies didn't. Community is something that companies have started to get right over time. But now we start looking at the mental, the emotional, the physical, and that purpose. And we start to see that that holistic approach to working with our people, to getting the best out of our people, is totally different. Now, by the way, if you do have any questions, please feel free to type them in at any point in time or hold them till the end. I know some of you did submit questions before the webinar. Either way, whenever you've got questions, type them in, send them at the end. I'll make sure I get to them during the webinar. So if you were to look at this one here, where would you say your company is doing the best? Where would you say? Just type it in for me. Which area do you think your company is the best of all of these? Like if you were to rate yourself out of 10, which one would be a 9 or a 10 or even an 8 out of 10? Which is the area where you think? Type those in for me because I want to see where your thinking is at. When we go to the surveys, one of the things that the surveys look for is, again, this holistic or this well-being approach to working with the human resources in our organization. Because, you know, I've said it for many, many years, your people in your organization are either your greatest asset or your biggest challenge. And of course, in most companies, they're not their greatest asset. I mean, that's what happens. And that comes back to your approach, okay? Your approach to the human resources. So purpose in business, excellent, Sandy. Having a great purpose is very important. I know for many years, I've always said the who we are and why we do what we do is just as or more important than what we do. And that's a big part of recruiting, a big part of retention, a big part of moving those people across. Purpose in business and community. Excellent. Thank you, Marcia. Community is definitely a big one. You know, the more people come to an organization looking for a job, and if they find something greater than that, once they get there, then the retention level is obviously far greater. The impact is far greater. The level of expertise coming out of them is far greater. The more they find of all of these 8 facets, obviously the greater the ability for that person to become a high performer and do extraordinary things, as Drucker said. Mental and emotional, excellent. So where does that take us to then? Well, if we start to think about that holistic approach and start to look at where we're going, our human resources team can start to think differently than the way they did before. Gone, 100% gone are the days when human resources is where you went to complain about something. You know, that is not the reactive, it is the old reactive human resources organization. An old reactive human resources organization is no longer fit in today's world. It doesn't fit in today's world. And I know if you're a HR exec watching this, I know that you understand what I'm saying, because you're here means you're forward thinking and you're very different to that old way of thinking. But in understanding how we structure and what we structure, understanding the needs, wants, and desires of your people looks at a different way. Now, in this virtual hybrid style world that we live and work in today, those things about mental well-being, I know when tomorrow I get on a call with my team in Turkey where there's just been a large earthquake. The mental and emotional well-being of my team is something that needs to be discussed openly, talked about. These things are not things you can brush under the carpet anymore. When a team member or an entire team has an emotional challenge and it's not dealt with, that impacts the organization. It impacts the team. It impacts the bottom line. It impacts all of these sorts of things. So knowing this, now, by the way, I'm going to be open with you about something that years ago, when we first started talking about the word love in business, right? We started talking about, do your customers love doing business with you? And then it progressed to, do your people love coming to work? Do they do that? Now, when the word love was first introduced in business, do your customers love doing business with you? And it was sort of like a real Apple type thing way back in the day. A lot of people had a lot of, I'm not sure the word love should be in business. Then when it was, do your people love coming to work? That's taken a little far, isn't it? In leadership today, it's like, do your people know you love them as part of your team? Do they know that? And when I first came across the concept of leaders loving their people, I got to tell you, it's a stretch. It still is a bit of a stretch. But I know where the world is moving and where things are changing and how things are changing. So these dealing with and looking at and being open and honest about the mental health and the emotional well-being of our people is very important today. And even for those who, during the Great Resignation left and want to come back, they're looking for something different than what they had before. So as managers and leaders, we sort of want to take a look at this and say, are we ready for the future of work? Are we ready for that future? Are we ready for the word love being a part of what we do? Well, let's step it back from love just a little bit, and let's go with authenticity, empathy, and adaptivity. Okay, let's step it to those three areas and start saying, okay, if we're going to be human-centric, what does that look like? And the authenticity is allowing people to be a true expression of themselves. The empathy, like genuine care. Don't put the song and dance on that, hey, we care. You don't need to talk about it if you actually do it, sort of thing. That's the reality of where world is right now. And I know recently one of my team pointed something out to me, and the immediate response is, oh, I have to defend myself. But no, go straight to the apology. Apologize for the upset first, and then look for a solution. I was in the wrong. I had to admit that, and I have to move forward. If you care for people, you don't have to say you care for people. Let's just leave it at that one there. And flexibility, the needs, wants, and desires of the world has shifted. Schooling has changed. Therefore, people with kids, their work has changed. There's so many more things that we need to take into account. And we'll get to that more as we go through today's session. So how do we as human resources people, or you as a CEO or C-level exec, how do we boost the effectiveness of our management team and our leaders, I guess, as well? And the first one is always very, very clear, and that is an absolute clarity of what it looks like to be effective. If someone doesn't have a vision of what it looks like, I know when we recruit people, one of the most important things is to be able to show them, if you come into this job, this is what it will look like if you are successful. That's not just for recruiting, that's in every position in your organization. So when you sit with a manager in your company and say, okay, what does effectiveness look like to you? What will happen when you're effective? What are the results going to be when you're effective? What will be the vision of your effectiveness? And when you get absolute clarity on that, then you can start moving to step two, the planning side of it. Okay, so what is the plan? How will you get there? What are the steps along the way is very important. And then obviously step three is creating development opportunities for them, finding areas and books and courses and programs and all of these things that will assist them in that. A learning program that is just for the sake of learning and not to move them towards an effectiveness, not to move them towards something is just not a good learning program. They have to be proactive. They have to be thought about. They have to be leading someone somewhere. It has to be thought through learning for each, especially at a management level, especially at a leadership level. Okay. And then obviously working on those soft skills. And we can do that with feedback. We can do that with 360s, feed forward, as Marshall Goldsmith calls it. But that understanding of what's going on, how they've shifted, and then what other shifts do need to be made in that step of creating an effectiveness in any organization. So, yeah. Hang on, did I jump 2 there or just 1? I jumped 2. Look at that, huh? Press that button twice, Brad. So, change. You know, you hear the statement, change, the only constant is change. Change will happen. How much change is happening? Well, you know, the theory of the pandemic was that we virtualized the world about 7 to 10 years for each year. Okay. And I go back to when Amazon said they're doing the number of packages in 2020 was what they thought they'd be doing in 2027. You can see how fast that jumped. Okay. So that amount of change has created a fatigue for our team. They've not been enough time off. They don't get that time off, especially if they're working from home where, you know, their brain doesn't shut off. They don't get to leave an office or leave a building and switch off and then walk into home, which is their sort of sanctuary type thing. It's a different way of looking at it. But the team at Gartner have said, okay, what does change management need to look like in the current day or in the future? Now, obviously, in setting the strategy or defining the vision of where we're going, it's been really interesting to sit back and say, okay, how has that shifted over the years? And the more co-creation that you can have, obviously, the more clarity that there is. Now, there needs to be guidance from leaders. There needs to absolutely be involvement from leaders. And a lot of the time I've found for my own effectiveness in the organization is to get that feedback from people and get as much of it as possible and then build that into that future strategy. But what relieves people's fatigue from change or people's desire to not change is being involved in the process of change, if we can be involved in it. Second one, plan implementation. When a team not only is involved in the vision, but then involved in creating the plan of how to make that vision a reality. And you know, you can go back to the book Multipliers, and I think Multipliers takes this to a whole other level, where we now build people who are thinking for themselves. We build people who are seeing the vision for themselves. They're involved in it. They're seeing the plan for themselves because they're helping evolve that plan. You know, so I think that's important. And we go then to communication levels and say, all right, how do we have open communication about the change? How do we make sure that these discussions are had and there is open conversations, not just a one-way conversation? The days of let's roll out the communication plan on the change are different to today. We have to involve people at all levels. And the more people you can involve, and I think, what was his name? He wrote the book, It's Your Ship. And when you go back to, if anyone remembers the name of the guy that wrote It's Your Ship, if you can type it in for me so my brain can let that go for a second. Otherwise, it's going to stick in my head until I remember his name. Obviously, he was a captain. So, but in his philosophy of It's Your Ship, chatting with every single team member over a period of time allowed him to do that. Abrashoff, is it Tom Abrashoff? I think it was Tammy. Michael, that's who it was. Michael Abrashoff. Thank you for helping me with that. Otherwise, my brain would have been stuck there for the day. But having that open and honest communication and open conversations definitely leads that. I remember Captain Abrashoff tells a story in there of having to discipline 2 men and doing it in front of a team of the people and actually being open and clear about it, and just how that shifted the energy of the whole organization, I think is really, really important to understand. So to change or not to change, Lily Leong is definitely a forward thinker. The statement, how can I say this in an easy way? You're going to have to change. The world is shifting. If you don't change, you're going to fall behind. A tree doesn't stop growing. If it stops growing, it starts dying. If your organization is not shifting with the times, then you're falling behind because your competitors are. They're moving ahead. They're moving forward. They're doing it differently. And even if you think you're maintaining status quo, you're not. You're falling behind others. And the same as the tree. If you're not growing, you're dying. So if instead of saying we've got to change, though, you say, hey, we get to change, we get to implement, we get to grow, we get to do new things. Remove that whole, and thanks Ian Woodhouse for this one, Ian Woody, get rid of that thinking that is, I've got to, and move into the thinking of I get to shift, I get to change, I get to do these things. And that's really one of the ways that we need to be looking at it. So in this era of learning and development, because the speed of learning, the speed of change, all of these things are important to the speed of growth of the business. If we want the business growth to happen, we obviously need more learning. A business and a person can't outperform their learning. You just can't outperform. You can't do better than you know how to do. You can't do better than you've practiced. You can't do better than you've been trained, if that makes sense. So this age of change means an age of learning is necessary. And so if we're putting the human back in human resources, then we need to look at this in a slightly different way as well. Now, a part of this is the whole technology aspect to it. Now, at Engage and Grow, we understand, even though we're not technologists, if that's even a word, even though we are believers in humans, helping humans create engagement and therefore growth, that philosophy of having humans work with humans doesn't mean we don't want to take advantage of the technology available for us. In this AI world that we live in today, there are so many things that can be done through technology that allow us to, I go back to Drucker, be more effective. It's no more complex than that. It allows us to do that. Hey, Joey, could you just plug me in here? I've just got a battery thing hitting in. And so when we sit down and start saying, are we using the software that is most available for us? Obviously, you have to define what it is you want. If you're looking for any software, define what the outcome is that you want from the software, and then turn that into an algorithm to make a purchase decision around that and an implementation decision. While today's not about technology, I do think that we need to take advantage of it so we can allow humans to do a better job and get better results out there in the marketplace. Now, that being said, again, back to the Gartner team and the surveys that are being done today are really enlightening on a lot of aspects of it. Employee experience. Let's first of all come to that from a different angle. So over the, I guess, last 10 years, we've moved from customer service to customer experience. The customer service was the reactive group that took complaints from customers, if that makes sense, to now creating the customer experience model where we sit down and say, okay, what does the experience of the customer look like? What do the first 100 days of the customer look like? And I think Joey Coleman wrote a great book on that subject of Never Lose a Customer Again. Well, what if we took what Coleman says around never lose a customer again, and we applied that to our team, to the employee experience, and we said, all right, let's not focus on the customer experience right now. Let's go to one deeper layer and let's go to the employee experience. What is the employee experience in your organization? What does it look like? How does the employee experience rate for you versus other companies? And if we go to things like Glassdoor and all of these different aspects, we can see very clearly how well you are ranked, rated by employees, current and past, of working for your organization. So if we take Gartner's survey and say that if 47% of HR leaders say employee experience is a top priority for this year, then what we've got to sit back and do is start to design that employee experience, but from a far more human aspect, taking into account all 8 areas that say, okay, what does the emotional effectiveness, how do we actually get higher emotional effectiveness out of our people? What does the employee experience from a physical stage get to, from their health, all of these different aspects that we're asking ourselves, not just career and financial experience, but all 8 areas. It's vital for us to think from that perspective. Now, in this whole hybrid model, again, the surveys are showing us 10 different areas where we're going to have to work towards. And obviously the first one there is uniting. Okay, so diversity and bringing it to a unite is really an important aspect, and something that if you're going to design an employee experience, you're going to want to look at. The second is socialization. In this day and age, mental, emotional, physical, all of these things are helped by social. Socialization in the workforce creates so many other benefits that you don't even think of. If we go back to Tony Hsieh of Zappos fame, may you rest in peace, Tony. He was such a great idea talking about the word collisions, and it's just how many collisions happen. And yes, if your team are socializing, will they have an idea that's a work idea whilst they're there? Yes, in many cases they will. So fostering that is something that can add significant results to the business. The third one that you're going to have to look at in your employee experience model and that plan for it, like almost an employee experience map. Think of mapping out the employee experience and what that would look like. Specifically map out their first 100 days, because that first 100 days is the make or break time for a customer, and the same for a team member in your organization. So what is the communication model that needs to be used moving forward? When you go to technology and you see things like Slack or Microsoft's Yammer or all of these different tools that are available for more effective, more immediate, faster, better communication, more collaborative communication, it's important to do that. Expectations is the next thing that we're going to have to think of in our employee experience. What is expected of that team member, and when is it expected by? How do they fit in? What is it that when we sit down and we talk with people about their jobs and responsibilities, and let me be really clear on this. If someone has been working for you or working with you for more than 12 months, what you expect of them today is different from what it was back on day one. And the clarity around that is a big part of what that employee experience is going to need to be and do for you in the organization. Will your company change during that employee's tenure? Yes, it will. Will there need to be a transition from one job to another? Will they need to change? Might they get promoted? Might they get shifted sideways? Might they get shifted to a different territory, different region? There's so many absolute things that are going to change. But if we want that transformation, we got to have the transitions. So we've got to plan that in there. Morale is another thing that is one of the top 10. And again, thank you to all the HR execs and the Gartner team for doing these surveys. But the isolation factor of today, yes, Zoom is wonderful. We're here on Zoom. But what if we were all in a room together doing this, and then we could grab a coffee afterwards and we could have some lunch and sit and chat and do all of those sorts of things? Would the morale of our group be higher if we sat in a room doing that? It's like you watch a comedian, you go to a comedy store, you sit in the room and watch the comedian and you laugh out loud, okay? You actually raucous belly laughs, you're doing all that. Same comedian, same show, you put it on your iPad and you watch it. You're not laughing out loud. It's a different thing. So morale needs to be something that you plan into that employee experience program. So training, again, digital training, all of these things, wonderful, so efficient, so many things, but they're not the things that you jump up and go, wow, this is massively helping our employee engagement, because they're not engaged with another human. Okay, so that human to human factor. So how do you handle training when it's not done live, when it's done on video, all of those different things? Technology, obviously the future of work, part of the program has got to be the technology, everything from good headphones. You know, a good set of headphones makes a big difference. And I got to say, a bigger screen, multiple screens, it makes a big difference in this day and age. And so when we're thinking about the employee experience, these are the top 10. Now, workflow, oh my goodness, this one is so challenging in this virtual, viral, hybrid world that we live in, where we've got to sit back and start thinking. But if you start thinking of workflow and how things need to fit in remote employees, even the simple things of having a meeting. You know, I know for us, when we, in one of our businesses, we brought together our top 50 people from around the world. Well, 20 of them were in a room and 30 of them were on Zoom. So looking at that, just reimagining how you do things like this to fit in those remote employees so that they're not part of that Geico commercial where the people think, oh, am I on? Am I here? Oh, you forgot your microphone. Oh, no, you know, we've got to rethink that stuff. And the work-life balance, you know, if you're going to design a great employee experience, that has to be part of it. There's no two ways around it. So these top 10 challenges that faced by the human resources departments around the world need to be faced with a rethink of the employee experience. We need to rethink that and look at how the flexible work models allow us to get far more out of our people, but we got to do it slightly differently. Now, why? Not just Drucker's thing about getting great things out of people, but why do we have to do it today? Well, you know, we'd all love to go back to 2008. Not really, because it was a, you know, downturn in the economy worldwide. But from an HR perspective, it meant that we had, you know, a very easy time of finding great people. In 2022, the Manpower survey showed us this result, and I'd be intrigued to see when we get to the end of 2023 if that number went up or down. I'm guessing it probably went up a little bit. But when you're saying that 75% of companies cannot get the people that they need, 75%. What does that mean to us? It means that these companies are now headhunting far more often. It means these companies are finding different ways of doing things. It means they're trying to get lean and mean in so many different areas, but it also means they're trying to get the most out of the talent that they've got. Big thing, though, that it really means you got to retain talent. If you don't retain the talent, you're going to struggle. Because if everyone's finding it hard to get great people, when you go out to that marketplace, especially if you're in a growth business, if you're in a growth business, it's going to be even harder. So this employee experience doesn't just start once they're on board. The employee experience has to start with the candidate experience. What is the candidate's experience of your organization? And that first touch point, when they first reach out, when they first hit the website, when they first go to the application, what's the first thing that your organization does? And does it wow them? Does it make them go, wow, I'd love to work here? Wow, this seems like this feels like me. This is a good place. I feel this. You know, they've got to get that in their head and their heart. They've got to see that you are part of, like, all 8 spectrums of that human are taken care of. Now, that being said, most people, when it comes to recruiting today, are still not proactive. They're still reactive, meaning when they need someone, they put a help wanted ad out. No, in this world, you need to be out there. You need to be part of the LinkedIn groups of your organization. You need to be part of the Facebook groups. You need to be interviewed in magazines. You need to be anywhere that there are blogs or podcasts or anything about your industry. Someone on your team needs to be seen there, and they need to be seen saying things that are forward thinking. They need to be seen as a great company to work for because they're hearing interviews with the CEO. Like if someone hits a podcast and says, wow, that CEO, I would love to work for that company because that CEO's vision on leadership or the way that they look at managing an organization is something that, yeah, I'd like to work there type thing. So you've got to be far more proactive in building that reputation. You've got to be far more proactive in building a database of potential hires down the road of people, especially if you're in a growth business. And finally, the bottom point on this one here of simplifying the process. Dang, I can't help but state just how when you make it overly convoluted, confusion leads to loss. I mean, you don't, in sales, in marketing, in recruiting people, because really recruiting is a marketing and sales operation in many ways today. If you lead someone to confusion, you lose them. Confuse and lose. No more complex than that. Make it simplified. Now, that being said, I don't think that means make it easy for them to get a job. Okay. You still want someone to have to jump through some hoops to get the job with you. You still want them to not just want a job. You want them to want to work with you. You want them to want to be a part of your team, to be part of your vision, your mission, your culture, your organization. You want them to want to be a part of that, not just to get a job, if that makes sense to you out there in the market. So if you have not, please go to engageandgrow.com and download our manifesto. Jump on there, the ebook of the big engagement. You'll see many podcasts, many webinars, a whole bunch of ebooks on there. You can watch them, hand them out to your team, do whatever you need to do to make sure you learn how to get through that talent shortage. Now, let's talk about the opposite of that, okay? I love my job. Remember that word I said? Love. Yes, love in the world of business. So, especially with the hybrid and remote world that we live in, three main things that need to be in ECH: expectations, communication, and humanization. When you get on a Zoom meeting, in fact, we'll come to that in just a second. Let's do expectations first, okay? Clarity of communication around expectations. If I'm working with you and we're in the same office, I can, overhear things or oversee things or notice things that are being done or not being done. When we're in a hybrid or a remote workforce, we can't do that. So we need to have much better clarity of expectations. One of the things that I noticed for a lot of our clients when COVID first happened and everybody went remote, you found out very quickly if you were a good manager or a good leader or not. You found out very quickly if the people understood what you expected of them and understood your communications. Second one, hang on, put that button there. Second one that we need to look at is that of communication, okay? How do we make certain that open communication happens? You got 10 people in an office and 5 people working remotely or vice versa. How do you make sure that communication in the office, that office joke, that office party, how do you make sure that they feel a part of that? There's a lot of things to think of in that hybrid communication model. Humanization. I'll go back to my point I was going to make earlier. When you jump on a Zoom meeting with someone and you haven't seen them for a while, do you ask about friends, family, life, or do you get straight to business? Often if you were meeting someone if you were running into them in the office, or if you were doing that, you would ask them about things like that. So don't lose that humanization just because we've got a more virtual world, I guess the simple thing is, and even more important is that when companies first went virtual, And let's say you and I had worked together. Let's say you and I had worked together for 4 or 5 years. We'd worked in the same office. We'd seen each other around. We'd hung out. We'd had lunches, had dinners, been to meetings together, all that sort of stuff. When we went virtual, you and I, it was really easy to keep good in communication, good with being human, because we already knew each other, right? We already had a connection at some level. Now, when people join an organization that are virtual and viral, how do they get that connection into the organization is a really big thing. Okay, so when you're building your employee experience, and I think this is a big part of our 12-week programs at Engage and Grow, is that we help you start to bring the humanization factor out of people. If we're going to engage them and unite them and get into that growth factor, then that's going to be a big part of it. Okay, so the future of work, planning for where it's going. If 42% of HR leaders are saying this, then maybe we want to focus in on it. Okay, so candidate engagement, prospective candidate engagement, employee engagement, the employee experience. What is it going to look like as you build your plans for this year into the next 5, 6, 7 years up to 2030 sort of thing? How are you going to build? And it's really crazy when you think about, if you're building a customer experience model, you build it based on a standardized, okay, this is the type of customer we're going to build it for. When you're building an employee experience model, there needs to be a lot more humanization, a lot more flexibility built into it, because there's going to be different people in your company, different profiles, all of that sort of stuff. So keep that one in mind. I think that's basically what I just said right there. So same thing, only different. Yeah, big part of it. Employee experience, map it out, especially that first 100 days, and bring people together. Bring people together. If you want to have a great induction program and you want to have great performances out of the people, we need to bring them together. Okay. The work experience, I do love these two words in that, as a young man, it was like, you went out and you did work experience, and you actually worked for a company for free. They call that an internship these days, but it's a different thing. But what I'm looking at from this perspective is, how do you make sure that people's experience of work is greater than just getting a paycheck? How do you make it that their experience of what they do every day is something that's fulfilling and valuable, and they get more from it than that? Again, we go back to the 8 core points. If you're going to build a great employee experience, you're probably one of the people that is more courageous than most HR people, more courageous than most CEOs. And that's why I think, I've often referred to our clients here at Engage and Grow as some of the most courageous leaders in business, because to go down the path of employee engagement is one that you have to do it. Okay, there is no 2 ways around it. You have to, in this day and age, do that, and that's why you're here. Obviously, you understand that, but to do that in such a way that you open up, and again, I come back to that word love. Will that evolve? It definitely worked for businesses building love with their customer, and the customer loves transacting with them and creating communities of customers. And Harley was obviously one of the first to do that and do an amazing job at creating a customer group. And people love belonging. They love that feeling, and people love coming to work. And that leadership love is a big thing. The compassionate leader, that if we go back to that. So to the question and answer segment of what we do. And again, if you are watching this and it's the first time meeting us at Engage and Grow, please do jump on engageandgrow.com, get to know us a little more, and find out about what we do. So, questions. Okay. let me go to I had two earlier, and then if any of you do have questions that are on here right now, please type them in and get it there. Elsa, okay, let me go to I've got the two other questions, then I'll come to these ones here. But Elsa, yes. How vulnerable should a leader be? Look, I had it put to me recently that if you've got two leaders, you've got the one that everybody loves being around, okay? You've got the leader that everybody loves and everyone loves being around, but that company is failing. The company's losing money. The company is going bankrupt type thing. And then on the other hand, you've got the leader that, you know, maybe they're a bit rough around the edges and maybe not everyone loves being around them, but there's a level of respect and they're doing a good job, but that company is succeeding. Which leader would you want? You know, do you want the one that everyone loves, but it's failing? Or do you want the one that's not perfect and not everybody loves them, but the company's succeeding? You know, now here's the other question, because I asked you a trick question right there in which one would you want? You don't want any of them. You want the leader that everyone loves and the company is succeeding. In this day and age, your people have the opportunity to change, to move, to go to a company where they have a great leader doing amazing things that they feel a level of care and a level of love from, that is also succeeding. We don't have to, I guess, live with half and halves anymore. Our team are capable of moving. And so how vulnerable should a leader be? How vulnerable do they want their people to be? You know, obviously we don't want work to turn into a therapy session all day, every day, but we need to get the work done, but we also need to make sure that we're taking care of it. And that's why I think, Elsa, if you go back to that graphic early in the presentation of all 8 areas, career, financial are still out of the 8 areas sort of thing. It's not, you know, we don't just have emotional going on there. So great question. Thank you for that. The next question, well, these two questions were put in before the event. So the first one is, if HR doesn't change, what's going to happen to that organization? I think I've answered a lot of that in today's webinar, but based on the surveys and all of the findings, if HR doesn't shift, and I won't just include HR, if CEOs, if C-level execs don't shift, then I think we'll see companies being abandoned by their people. I think we'll see companies that are not just struggling to get people, but struggling to keep people. So yeah, it's a really interesting one to contemplate. I might just have to contemplate that one a little more as to what would happen if they don't shift. I think we've made some pretty good arguments today of how that employee experience needs to be different. And that leads me to this other question. If you've got more questions, please type them in. I'd love to take them. So this other question, talking about employee experience, okay? Can we go too far on focusing on employee experience? Yes. Yes, we can. We can go too far. The purpose of an organization is to get great results out of people with a goal in mind. The purpose of the organization is not to just build people, okay? The purpose of the organization is to build people who build a company, build people who build profits, build people who get an end result, build people who make the mission of the organization, the vision of the organization become a reality. We don't just build people for the sake of it. We actually do it with a purpose in mind. And one of those purposes needs to be in business profitability. You know, that has to happen. Otherwise the company can't go anywhere type thing. But it also needs to be on mission and achieving its mission. So yes, you can go too far and think about it as just that. And that's why I do love in companies, especially in a C-suite where there's really good debate, an organization where there's good debate, where human resources has a debate with finance, because finance is saying, nope, we can't afford that much money. And human resources said, but we need that much money to be able to do this program and this program. And that debate is healthy. If we didn't have that debate, if operations and sales didn't have a debate, we very clearly put, if operations and sales don't have debates, then things don't get better. Operations demand more out of sales. Sales demand more out of marketing. Marketing demands more out of, do you know what I mean? So yes, it is. And I guess many of you have seen this. An organization that is run by a CEO who came from sales, which part of the organization is going to get the most care and love from that CEO? Obviously, sales. An organization that's run by a CEO that came from the HR background, obviously the HR is going to get the most love in that organization. So it's a real balancing act for a CEO to balance all the different entities, so the different people and teams within an organization to make it a reality. So does HR need to shift? Yes. Let's put the human back in human resources. Gang, thanks for being here on the webinar today. If you're new to Engage and Grow, please reach back out to the person that sent you this webinar. And let's get helping you to engage those team members, unite them together, and get that business growing. That's us here at Engage and Grow. Thanks for being on the webinar today. Bye for now.